And the fact is that um, the developmental slots are already sorted as well. It is Justine Passat and Jessica Timmins. Um, they're guaranteed developmental slots because in order to, we're now at the stage where they would have had to have cut, to make KK a developmental slot, they have to cut her. They would have to cut Megan McConnell. They would have to cut, what's her name?
The Indiana Fever have finalized their training camp roster, and the picture it paints is one of a team that has already locked in most of its spots before a single practice session begins. Unlike the previous year when several players were visibly competing for one or two open positions, the current setup leaves little to no room for competition. The developmental contract slots have also been settled, going to Temi Fagbenlé and Justine Betancourt. Kiana Traylor and Megan McConnell, along with Betancourt and others at the fringes of the roster, are effectively auditioning for spots elsewhere around the league rather than fighting for a place in Indiana. The concern raised around the developmental slots specifically centers on the fact that the team would have had to release players like McConnell or Traylor to open those spots for someone else, which was not done.
But, what's her name? Who else? Kiana Traylor. They would have to cut both of them in order to get them onto developmental contracts. So basically, it is Justine Passat and it is Jessica Timmins, which is really annoying because I'm like, look, Jessica Timmins is a scoring 5'8" guard. There is no world in which Jessica Timmins is going to ever do anything for the Fever. Why did you not just take Yarden Garzone or Hannah Stolke? Why did you not just take Yarden?
The result is that Jessica Timmins, a 5'8" scoring guard, occupies one of the developmental positions despite questions about what role she can realistically fill for this team. Critics of the decision have pointed to missed opportunities to add size through the draft's third round or by stashing a pick, noting that players like Han Chu or Kayla Alexander could have addressed the roster's lack of interior depth. The size question is one of the more persistent concerns heading into the season. The Fever are carrying a heavy guard rotation with Tyra Harris, Shea Ralph, Crystal Dangerfield, and Raven Johnson all representing undersized backcourt options. The argument is that a team does not need multiple guards of that profile, and having all of them on the same roster creates redundancy without solving the team's matchup vulnerabilities against bigger lineups.
Why did you not just take Yarden Garzone or Hannah Stolke in that third round? Why did you not just stash a pick? Why did you not just find whoever the tall... Why did you not take Kyla Oldacre? Why is there no size? Why? That being said, don't love it. Love the way it's structured because it is pretty much impossible for them to bring Megan McConnell or Kiana Trader. Like if Megan McConnell is unbelievable.
Lexi Hull and Sophie Cunningham, who both play the wing, may find themselves pushed into power forward minutes on occasion, which is not considered an ideal use of either player. On the positive side, the signing of Maisha Hines-Allen is viewed as one of the more underrated moves of the offseason. Hines-Allen, who earned a maximum contract the previous year, likely accepted a reduced salary to join Indiana, calculating that a productive season alongside Clark, Boston, and Mitchell would reset her market value heading into her next deal. The Fever have shown a pattern of attracting experienced players looking to rebuild their standing in the league, and Hines-Allen fits that profile. At 30 years old, she has several productive seasons ahead of her and has strong incentive to perform.
Megan McConnell is unbelievable. She's just going to be signed by another team. And the problem is that there are 4 players right now, with the way the Indiana Fever have done it, they've already promised 12 roster spots. There are 4 players trying out for other teams. They are not trying out for the Fever. Kiana Traylor, Megan McConnell, Jessica Timmins, and Justine Passat are trying out for other teams right now. And yeah, it is a very...
The big three of Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Mitchell, and Aaliyah Boston remain the foundation of the team's identity. However, there is a notable observation from last season. Across the 13 games in which all three were active, there was no consistent instance of all three playing well in the same game. Some games featured strong performances from Mitchell and Boston together, others from Clark and Boston, and others still from Clark and Mitchell while Boston contributed little. Getting all three operating at a high level simultaneously is the defining challenge for head coach Stephanie White heading into this season. Mitchell in particular has a documented history of slow starts.
It is a very, very interesting one. Is that how? Okay, there's two T's in Justine Passat. Okay, I have been misspelling the name. I was like, have I been spelling it wrong or did they spell it wrong? No, I have been spelling it wrong. I do want to apologise to Justine Passat. I have been misspelling your name. Um, but that being said, when it comes to the Indiana Fever roster, there is a lot that I do like. First of all, you're bringing back Caitlin Clark.
She has consistently needed time to find her rhythm at the beginning of each season, and the same pattern emerged during the unrivaled period. Given that dynamic, the expectation is that Aaliyah Boston may carry the heaviest load early in the year. Boston has played in every game of her career, comes in fully healthy, and will likely be the team's most reliable performer through the opening stretch of the schedule. The broader concern around Stephanie White's coaching centers on whether her preferred system suits this particular roster. The argument made by some observers is that Indiana actually performed better during the playoff run last year, partly because the injury-depleted roster forced White to adapt rather than implement a structured scheme.
First of all, you're bringing back Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Mitchell, and Aaliyah Boston. And the hope is that Stephanie White runs a system that works for all three of them. Like, look, I don't have much hope in that, but there's a difference. Like, Steph White absolutely she earned the full season. The fact is, in the 13 games that Caitlin, Kelsey, and Aaliyah played last year, I don't think in any of the 13 we saw all three play well. We saw games where Kelsey and Aaliyah were unbelievable.
The fear is that with a fuller, more stable group, the team may attempt to run a more defined system that does not play to the strengths of its best players. The specific worry is an offense where ball handling responsibilities get distributed too broadly, pulling creation opportunities away from Clark and Boston and putting the ball in the hands of secondary players in situations that reduce offensive efficiency. The overall assessment of the roster places Indiana as a third or fourth tier contender with more potential upside in the postseason than in the regular season. The team is considered a favorable matchup against the Aces in a playoff setting but remains behind the Liberty in a direct comparison. The Minnesota Lynx are flagged as a particularly difficult matchup, with Dorka Juhasz coming off a EuroLeague MVP performance and providing a size and versatility advantage that the Fever may struggle to counter.
We saw games where Kelsey and Aaliyah were unbelievable. We saw games where Caitlin and Aaliyah were unbelievable. We saw games where Caitlin and Kelsey were great and Aaliyah did nothing. This isn't like post-Olympics 2024 system. The problem is that so far in Steph White's system, and it is a big flaw from last year. But again, look, there's an entire year to work on this. There is an entire year. So I'm not going to be saying outright now that it's not the greatest thing because you have three of these players, but we haven't seen since Christy Sides was the coach.
The Chicago Sky are also seen as a problematic opponent given the Fever's recurring issues defending size. The ultimate outcome of Indiana's season will depend heavily on which teams they encounter in the postseason bracket and whether the roster peaks at the right moment. Load management is a phrase that has done real damage to the NBA's standing. What was once the undisputed second biggest sport in the country, behind the NFL, has steadily lost ground, now sitting somewhere behind college football, MLB, the WWE, and the UFC in terms of cultural relevance. A significant part of that decline traces back to fans paying full price to watch star players sit on the bench in street clothes.
Because you have three of these players, but we haven't seen since Christy Sides was the coach all three of them play well in the same game. And I get it, small sample size. Caitlin Clark was clearly injured last year. Kelsey Mitchell does not start off seasons well. Like, there's a joke like May Kelsey Mitchell, like she doesn't start seasons well. She didn't start Unrivaled well. She was horrendous in the 2024 start season coming off the injury. From what I had heard, look, I'm going to be honest, I wasn't watching the Fever in 2023. She was the same. She kind of plays her way into the season.
The resentment that built up around that practice is well documented, and it is a cautionary tale worth keeping in mind when discussing what the Indiana Fever are signaling ahead of this season. Caitlin Clark missed all but 13 games last year. 13. The Fever won a respectable number of games in that stretch, but the honest assessment from the fan base was that many of those victories were dull to watch.
Sixth, NFL, college football, MLB, WWE, UFC, NBA. Interesting. And load management is part of that. Setting back and watching these prominent NBA superstars not play in games to their full capacity, bitching about how many games they've got to play, bitching about how long they got to play in games.
That is a problem that goes beyond the win column. The WNBA's pre-Clark reputation was built largely on an unwatchable product. Clark's arrival changed that. Diluting her role, limiting her minutes, or managing her off the floor chips away at the single biggest reason casual viewers started tuning in.
Bitching about how long they got to play in games and watching some of these awful coaches set down their stars has really turned a lot of fans off. We all sat through Caitlin Clark missing every game last year due to injury except 13. I believe it was 13 games. And it made for one long season. Let me tell you. Somebody brought up online, you know what? The Indiana Fever.
The warning signals have been accumulating. Clark playing off ball, a point guard drafted with a publicly visible history of friction with the Clark fan base. Stephanie White using the phrase ramp her up language that sounds.
Somebody brought up online, you know what? The Indiana Fever won a lot of games last year, but a lot of those games that they won were still boring. And that's not a good look for the team, for their marketing, for the WNBA. You don't want boring games because that's what your league was associated with before Caitlin Clark's arrival, was boring and a piss poor product. Well, there's been all kinds of trouble.
White's framing around training camp was careful. Clark played USA basketball games in March. She has rhythm. She is ready. But the staff wants to be smart about her workload across a 4-4 game schedule with a heavy weekly cadence. Managing her reps. Building her up gradually. Not easing her in technically, but not unleashing her either.
There's been all kinds of troubled signals that have went up like flares all over the place. Caitlin Clark's going to play off ball. We're drafting a point guard. We're drafting a point guard that hates Caitlin Clark fans. You can't tell me she loves Caitlin Clark either, because I'm not believing that. Regardless of how much people will play nice once they're on the same team. It's still drama. The team just did.
The problem is that ramp her up is exactly what was said before she never came back last year. The phrase has lost credibility with the audience the Fever depend on most. The deeper concern is whether the coaching staff genuinely values Clark as the centerpiece of the offensive system or views her as one piece among many, with the team potentially functioning more smoothly, in their view, when the ball movement is not running through her. That belief, if it exists inside the building, would never be stated publicly.
Drama the team just didn't need. You got Stephanie White saying that, they're going to load manage Caitlin Clark, and we'll get to the fact that the Fever are still putting up their little social media posts about buying tickets. And when I tell you that has got swatted down by fans of Caitlin Clark, like
stating it publicly would be an organizational catastrophe. But the accumulation of decisions, the off-ball deployment, the guard-heavy roster construction, the load management language points toward a philosophy that is at minimum ambivalent about maximizing Clark's impact on the floor. The Indiana Fever's social media accounts have been actively pushing ticket sales. The fan response has been pointed.
Watered down by fans of Caitlin Clark, like Dikembe Mutombo is playing defense going, I mean, rejected back into the stands. Playoff ball, load management. This is starting to sound like a nightmare. A nightmare. Stephanie White.
You know, what is the time period or the acclimation, if you will, not just for her, but also the teammates?
Yeah.
Comments from buyers who spent thousands last season described watching Clark stand in the corner without screens, without designed plays, without the ball reduced to a spacing decoy while the offense ran elsewhere. Those same fans are now being asked to purchase again, A meaningful portion of them are saying no, not because they do not love Clark, but because what they paid for last season was not what they watched.
What is the time period or the acclimation, if you will, not just for her, but also the teammates around, or although is it advantage because you have a lot of new faces, so it's new for everybody?
Yeah, I think it's new for everybody. I think we got to be smart. She has worked her butt off this whole off season to prepare herself. We have an added advantage in that she played games in March, right, with USA Basketball. And so she has game exposure. She has game pace. She has game rhythm. She has game timing. And so we have an advantage. But we also want to be smart. She doesn't need every rep in practice. Like we want to continue to ramp her up.
The ticket pricing question is real and separate from whether games sell out. Sellouts will likely still happen. Clark's name still carries enough draw to fill a building. The issue is the premium attached to those tickets. When a product commands top-tier prices, it is because buyers believe what is on the floor is worth the cost.
So want to be smart. She doesn't need every rep in practice. Like we want to continue to ramp her up. It's a long season, 44 games, and we play a heavy cadence of games in a week. And so we want to be smart in camp and make sure we I don't want to say ease her into it because she's ready for camp, but we want to make sure that we manage the reps and what kinds of reps she's getting just to build her up so that she's ready to go. And we don't have any kind of questions about that.
I mean, come on. Ramp her up?
If the product delivered is Clark playing limited minutes off ball while the bench struggles to contribute, the gap between price and value widens. Gate revenue matters. Secondary market prices matter. The long-term willingness of casual fans to invest at premium rates matters.